Hello everyone, welcome to the SAP Fiori-side chat. My name is Eugen Winchell and I'm with the SAP UX Product Management Team. And I'm joined by my co-host Keith Fisher. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Eugen. Good morning.
Today's topic for the Fiori-side chat is the SAP UX Strategy. And as usual for that, we have invited a great round of experts from the extended SAP family for a panel discussion. In today's round, we have a partner and customer from the SAP App House network and colleagues from the design and product management teams. We have with us Dina Glatzel, Janice Shuttleworth, Jan Rüssel, and Sean Sivertson. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to have you with us, and I'm really looking forward to a great conversation with all of you today. And to make it truly interactive, we invite all of you to ask questions and comment during our chat. But before we get started, we just wanted to set a few ground rules. And over to Keith for that.
Yes, hello everybody. Looking forward to this discussion. So our rules for engagement are actually very simple on this chat. This is not a sales session. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not collecting your information aside from maybe your first name, if you could enter that into the chat. We understand that we're part of a larger ecosystem and we have lots of technologies around us and many other people helping, but we ask you to refrain from promoting third-party services or tools. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see a chat button. You can go ahead and click on that. It could pop out the webinar chat. Go ahead and introduce yourself there. As I've written already, we'd like to know who you are. There's also a Q&A button down there at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can also pop that out and ask questions there. And if you, as we have a chance through the discussion, we'll insert the questions that come from the audience. And if you are and would like to be actually on screen or on audio, go ahead. There's a video and audio button there in your lower right. Leave it off if you're not speaking, but go ahead and click on it if you'd like to kind of ask your question or join the discussion directly. So we do keep things fun. We do keep things professional. This meeting is recorded and will be available on the Fiori-side chat wiki that we'll provide for you as well. And without further ado, let me turn it over to our panels for introductions. So first, Jan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm Jan Rüssel. I'm heading the user experience product management team and really looking forward to the session. I've been a follower on YouTube, haven't been here live, and really looking forward to it.
Great, welcome. And Dina, go ahead and introduce yourself. Welcome back.
Hi, so I'm Dina. I'm leading part of the design team that's creating Fiori as a design language. And it's my second time in the chat. Been with Fiori from the very beginning, and I'm happy to be here again.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome for her first time, Janice Shuttleworth. Janice, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. So good morning. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm in the same team as Dina. I lead one of the design teams for the central SAP UX organization. And again, yeah, I've been in Fiori from the beginning. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm really happy to be here today to chat with you about the UX strategy. Thank you, Keith.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And then Sean Sivertson, certainly no stranger to the Fiori-side chat. Welcome. Want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm Sean with Converge and IS.
Short and sweet. All right, Eugen, over to you. You want to get started?
Absolutely, yes. So before we actually get started with the chat, maybe a quick poll on your role in the organization, so that help us better understand like who you are and what you do. And actually, Jan, to you the first question. We just recently updated the SAP UX strategy. Could you tell us more about the big pillars within that updated strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. One specific thing we wanted to highlight and stress a little bit is really the value of user experience versus UI, right? That's still a misconception we see. So that's certainly one part we want to stress. But we also covered the topics across the board, and Sean and I talked about this at SAPPHIRE around integration, which is a big topic for SAP's user experience strategy, but also innovation. And last but not least, in these times, you know, working from anywhere. We all work remotely, and that's a big part as well. And what hasn't changed is keeping the user at the center of what we do during designing and developing software. So that's in a nutshell. I think the core pillars. Of course, there's going to be a lot more content in, but those would be the main pillars.
And Dina, from a design perspective, what is new and has evolved from the previous versions of the strategy? You mentioned like you have been with Fiori since more or less the beginning. So what has changed in the most recent update?
I think the first Jan just mentioned that we focus on the value of UX, and I think in the first strategy we very much focused on that part. Of course, there's still the value of UX, and it always makes sense to mention that again, because of course you're not just doing it for the fun of it, but that value, customers are now understanding UX better. They're understanding the value. They have their own focus on UX. They have more concrete requirements. So that's really changed. So we've evolved from that basic vision to something more concrete. Also, when it comes to customer requirements, they know exactly what they want. Like they have this focus on consistency, on integration. They know that that's what they need for their everyday business. We've evolved Fiori, of course. So we started with a very small set of controls and concepts, and now it's evolved to this big design system that includes multiple design languages like Fiori for iOS and Android, and there's web and conversational UX. We also include the new technologies that enable something like conversational or AR, VR. There's always new trends coming up that we didn't have in the beginning, of course. And we've also upgraded, I think, the technologies that enable the general Fiori implementation. And then there are now technologies that, like Fiori Elements, that enable you to quickly build applications. And I think that's the main thing that's evolved. Yeah.
That's really great stuff that you just mentioned, like even AR, VR. I'm excited to hear more about that. So Janice, you actually have been also part of the team that worked on the updated strategy deck and where this is all being taken. What is the area that you're most excited about?
I really am excited about the comprehensiveness of what we have to offer in the strategy. I think, as Dina mentioned, we've evolved Fiori considerably since its inception. And I think that now we have a very solid, very comprehensive design language supported by a set of tools. And I think we're catering to a very inclusive community as well. I think you all know that accessibility has always been very, very important for SAP. And we're now taking that a step further and talking about inclusivity, which kind of goes beyond accessibility. And we've always been a global company. You know, it's always been very important to us that we have customers around the world. So what I'm really excited about, is the comprehensiveness that I think we've come to a really great point with Fiori 3 and with the set of tools supporting it. And we also have a great future ahead because there's a lot more that we can do. And I think Jan alluded as well, to the importance of the user at the center of this strategy. This is very, very important. And also the acceleration that we've seen over the past 3 months of the importance of the digital world. We've seen it coming to schools, school kids who'd never done remote learning before. We've seen people doing remote sessions with healthcare professionals. And so we see that the expectations from the people using enterprise software are becoming higher and higher because of this acceleration, of this digital world coming into everyday life. So for me, I'm really, really excited about what we have and really excited about the future and kind of working on that with our customers, because if we have Fiori 3 today, it's only because we've had this constant cycle of feedback and innovation together with our customers.
It's actually great to hear from you. Like, it seems like you guys actually took the real life, the new reality, and had it as direct input into the updated strategy. This is actually amazing.
Yes.
Wow. Good. And Sean, actually, you know the SAP strategy also very well, and you know the UX strategy very well. From what you have been seeing, not only as a partner, also as a customer, what is needed most in the new reality from your perspective?
I think I think that idea of making things easy, you know, when Jan and I were talking in our SAPPHIRE session, I think we emphasized the idea that with everybody working remotely, we need it so much easier. And you can't as easily go and call Bob and ask for help, right? Because he's on Zoom calls. So we need to help people to be more self-sufficient. And where people are more self-sufficient, we need them to be able to move through maybe an application they haven't seen and touched before without needing a cheat sheet. And that means that consistency, that coherence is so important. You know, early in the game, simplicity, you know, this sort of 1-1-3 concept of, you know, one purpose, one app, no more than 3 clicks kind of thing to get it done. This was a good anchor point for the very first things that we were doing. But as Fiori has grown and evolved and taken on significantly more complex functions, you know, one of my favorite examples is that sales order fulfillment app, right? The world before was you'd have to run a dozen different transactions and go hunting for problems. And the world today is you have one app that highlights the problems and gives you a button to fix it. So that kind of a contrast of needing to remember 12 different complex reports and transaction codes, and some of those reports names were long, to having a simple place to go and look for something, to have the problems highlighted and the button to fix it right there, that's the kind of example of how we bring simplicity and ease of use to people who are picking up and filling in for somebody who's maybe out of commission for a few weeks and hopefully coming back to work. So that kind of ease of use, the intuitiveness, and helping guide somebody through to what they need to do next. Fiori 3 has come so far. And if we think about the contrast, the amazing contrast between those two things, I mean, it really hits you when you think about something that used to take, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to go looking for issues. And now you open it up and you have a list with a button to fix it. That is a beautiful simplification. That's simple right there. And that, you know, if you think about enterprise software delighting somebody, if you think about how hard it was to go into ME29N and find the right tab and find the right spot and then click the right way and then remember to press save before you exited. I mean, that's the kind of thing that would scare a CFO right out of SAP, and they'd be like, why are we using this? And you replace that with something where you get a red button and a green button on your phone to approve and reject a PO. That's delight, right? You know, that kind of contrast of before and after, even something that was so simple in 2013, and then things that have gotten simpler and simpler, that's to me is the magic, because it takes somebody that used to just be terrified of SAP because they used to feel stupid and they used to have to call their MM lead to come and help them just approve a PO. And now they can go do this simply, right, from their phone. They really can. And that is something that for our team, when we're bringing new people in, even if all they have to do is run a dunning process and you know, follow up on aged receivables, it's simple because you've got a list and you've got a button of here's how I send them their account statement. This kind of thing is really, really easy. And that make it easy, that make it so that you don't have to call Bob for help. That's the name of the game today.
Yeah,
Sean,
I mean, I think that's, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Keith. I just wanted to pick up on the point Sean said there, because getting to that simple user experience is exactly what we mean, or how to get there is to put the user at the center, right? So versus figuring out with the experts who know the transaction, who know the process by heart, what to offer the users, loop them in, connect the two worlds, and come up with a new process that makes it simple and coherent to use for the user. So I think that's really a core mindset, a core piece of our methodology, how we work, that can make a difference and create these opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. I mean, I think that kind of goes back to what Christian Klein was speaking about as, you know, a focus on customer success here, right? And then these pillars of things like integration, right, innovation and agility. I mean, let's just take one of those pillars and dive into it a little bit. So, you know, how is, you know, the theme of integration woven into our UX and updated UX strategies? Janice, do you want to take that to start?
I think that the consistency, I think is, I mean, we talked about that pillar earlier. What's very important for users is the consistency of the experience as they're going across different applications, because as you know, as other panelists mentioned earlier, we're not necessarily using one application when we're carrying out a business task. We're typically going across a family of applications now owned by SAP. And if we don't have the right level of consistency, then we're not gaining trust. Because if people come to the applications, as Sean was saying earlier, people do not have time to learn how to do things differently. So when they come to an application, they've got a job to be done. And what they need to do is get in and get the job done. So if they're having a coherent experience across the applications, then it's easier for them to get that job done. And we've done a lot of work with the Fiori design language to enable consistent patterns that suit different use cases and also different types of users. I think we mentioned earlier that when we first started off with Fiori, we were using very, very simple use cases, you know, for casual tasks such as leave request. And now we've evolved Fiori into professional use cases where people are carrying out very, very complex tasks. And so, you know, as we've moved ahead, we've evolved more and more, and all of these patterns and experiences are part of this consistent whole. So that means that if you're using the leave application, there's some level of consistency, even if you're using one of our professional applications for doing some very, very heavy duty work. And this goes across our mobile applications as well. It goes across iOS, it goes across Android. So this is really the beauty of having this design language, and it's a design language that can evolve, is that we can integrate these new patterns, experiences. Eugen was talking about AR, we've mentioned conversational. All of this has to be part of one coherent experience. Otherwise, you're breaking the experience, right? You go from one thing to another, and suddenly, you know, where am I? am I in a different world? So I think that that's really, you know, what we're aiming for in terms of integration from a user experience perspective. That there's no break. That there is no breaking that experience as I go from one application to another to get my work done.
In terms of consistency and integration, Jan, maybe towards you. I mean, obviously integration is very important from a design perspective, but also like from a technology perspective. Can you give us like an update, like what are we doing there? Like what's happening there? Just to get a feel of that, not the UI is just being integrated, it's also like the underlying systems, if I understand right.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a big theme from Christian Klein, our CEO, when he talks about integration. And I see there's, thanks for the poll, there's a few developers in the call. You know, if you look at the architecture, you can integrate on a data level, you can integrate on a process level, and with UX consistency, we're coming from the UI side as well, where you can do that integration to get that coherent experience across SAP products, which is what Janice alluded to. The way we address it at SAP is to look at intelligent enterprise scenarios, for which we actually have something called suite qualities, where user experience is one part of. There's also security, there's data integration, etc. User experience as part of this program is one aspect that for these scenarios will realize what we're working on with Fiori 3 and getting this consistency standardized across the processes. So that's the direction we're taking, and maybe building on something Dina, you said earlier, very important here is that Fiori as a design system can be realized by different technologies, right? The very prominent one we have is SAP UI5. But it's not necessarily restricted to that, right? We are looking at other technologies within SAP, or even technologies beyond that could implement and realize that design system to get a consistent UX, even on different stacks.
Yeah. So, and Dina, you mentioned like you have been for many years on the Fiori side, and you have like seen a lot of evolution from the early beginnings to where it is now like a fully fledged design system. Is there anything that you can sort of say share with us to see like what the magnitude of the design system is?
So maybe I could start. Yeah, this is just a little bit the Fiori big picture. So we were talking earlier about the comprehensiveness of Fiori with the design system, the technologies and tools, and the portfolio of apps. And I think maybe this is maybe a good slide for Dina to kind of drill down into.
Yep. Thank you, Janice. So this is the design system and what it's evolved to. And the base of it is always that we have, of course, values and we have principles, and the principles basically stay the same ever since we started with Fiori. So we want to be role-based. So it's clear that the person using our application is in one mindset, one role. He gets everything he needs to do his job. Then we want to be adaptive, so it works on different devices, which we all know is more important than ever. We want to be simple, so it's easy to use, and Sean's also mentioned that, how important that is. We want to stay, of course, coherent and delightful in a sense of that. When we started in SAP, we started with SAP GUI. A lot of people weren't using anything technology-wise except for what they did at work or what they maybe did in Word or Excel, and you didn't privately use technology as much as you do today. So today we already have, and we will have a really consumer grade customer base that is used to, I don't know, to apps like Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So they're used to very different experience and a very easy experience. And all of this is also our base for deciding how we build our design system and how we do our interaction. Then of course we also use practices like design-led development. So yesterday someone said we design for people and we design with people, and I think that's really what it is. So we're trying to design for the users, and to do that and to do the right thing and to even know what the user needs, we need to design with the user. And then we've come to the many design languages that we have today. So we started with Fiori for Web in the very early days, and basically started with this adaptive design system that we have for where you can use any application on a mobile device, but also, I don't know, on a tablet or on a desktop. And then now we found out that there are also cases where you really need the mobile qualities of your device. So that's why we then started with Fiori for mobile with iOS and later also Android, so that we really focus on that. And we have the SDKs that we do together with Google and Apple, so that we really work together on bringing together Fiori that we have with the native experience from your Apple device or from your Google device. And then of course the conversational user experience, where we go in a more natural direction. And I think we've come from this very small part that was very much on the left in the web space to this big picture now that supports all different kind of aspects that you may need when building a user experience for your users and for your customers. And then you can always pick and choose what you need in that specific case. And then of course we also have, and Jan said it, we have different technologies that enable this, from the native, from the very basic ones like UI5 or Fiori Elements, but to also it's a design system, so you can basically build it with anything. Just the only benefit that you have if you're using the technologies coming from SAP is that you get everything out of the box basically. So you get accessibility, you get the qualities that go beyond just the screen, and you get the finished controls, you get everything, you don't have to build it yourself. So yeah.
I mean, you mentioned like this is really has grown over the last few years tremendously, like from a small box on the left in the web space now to like even beyond mobile on the conversational space as well. This is really impressive. And from what I understand, you guys keep innovating and always look out for new trends on what's going on in UX space and keep adding to Fiori. Is that correct?
Yeah, we also work a lot with research, of course, because in the end, we're not building it for ourselves, we're building it for the users, and we're trying to find out, it's always a mix. There's trends and technology changes that we watch, of course, and see is there something there that we can help our customers use, or that will make life easier for our end users. But then there's always feedback, and we do research, and so we know what's working and what's not working and what we need to change or where something's missing. And all of this then changes the design over time and also the system over time.
Right. So
and
Sean,
expectations might change over time as well. We see that, the expectations that people had of enterprise software probably 20 years ago, it's probably different, to the expectations that people have today. So I think it's important to also keep abreast of that, and also to keep abreast of what other companies are doing, because we know that expectations are also very much driven by what people see elsewhere, and we have our mobile solutions, but of course we know that even if people are not heavy users of mobile applications in their work situation yet, we know that in their personal situation they are, so we know that that's driving the expectations. So as Dina said, it's the research, and it's also keeping our eye on what is happening everywhere and what could be of value to our enterprise solutions. And not everything is of value, maybe. Maybe some things are really cool and it's really great, and maybe it's great to have it for your entertainment system at home, but maybe that's not so cool, if you're using enterprise software and if you're trying to kind of close, you're trying to do your Q4 closing. So we also have to be very mindful of the applications that we're building, and also the target users for whom that we're building. Yeah, so we don't want to we also do not want to introduce something that makes no sense. Yeah, maybe it doesn't make sense now, maybe it could make sense in 20-30 years. If it doesn't make sense now, then we're not going to push it just to kind of be cool. That's not the point. Yeah, being cool in enterprise software is being really efficient and really getting your job done, and delivering.
I was really hopeful that would be our new slogan for SAP. We make enterprise software cool, but maybe.
But we do. Yeah, we do. We do.
Well, speaking about innovation and the new reality and things like, so Sean and Jan, you guys had a great conversation for your SAPPHIRE session around the innovations that were necessary nowadays in the business. And so Sean, I was kind of curious if you want to share a little bit about, follow on to your story about the T2200 form, how that came about, and what that means, for our customers and the types of solutions that they're expecting.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Keith. I think the idea that simple is easy is sometimes a little bit muddled. And one of the things that we found is in consumer software, and this of course being one of the reference points that people have today, if you're one of those large companies, you only need to make a handful of apps. You need to make one for Android and one for iOS, and maybe somebody still makes one for some other kind of phone these days. But you can spend a lot of time and energy designing what color to make the button and where to put it and all of these other wonderful things. In enterprise software, it is about getting your job done. And being delighted in the context of enterprise software usually means, wow, that was easy. As in, I could get through that complex thing really quickly and easily. So, if we think about where things like that are applied, we talked, Jan and I, in our SAPPHIRE session about how you can make something like complex procurement really, really simple and really easy. And we talked about how you can go and make policies and processes really easy to follow along with the tool. And we talked about how you can take that idea of the intelligent enterprise and how that doesn't necessarily need to mean AI, but it can mean something that is just easy to follow. I mean, it's arguably, there is some intelligent enterprise functions in buying off Amazon. It's been made really, really simple to go find something that you're looking for and go press buy. So bringing that, for instance, to, you know, public sector procurement, but helping them also follow their policy and the process. Or that tax form, you know, when we think about where Fiori has gone, there's all of the SAP developed apps, and there are so many great apps, and that's the first place to look. And then there's also, for many people, there's, you know, it's an SAP app or it's a custom app. And, you know, where that often leaves something in the middle is, well, what about things that are already pre-made? Because you know, there are several different places that you can look. So there's the App Center, there's partners that build packaged applications. And so if you're looking at something and it's not already out of the box, then the first knee-jerk reaction for a lot of organizations is to go, I guess we need to customize it. And so, you know, looking for something in the middle. So this was one of those places where Keith, you know, Keith is also in Canada. And so one of the things that we have in Canada is this tax form, the T2200. And most people haven't really heard of it, but it's the I had to work from home form. So we were listening to some of our customers of, hey, you know, what's going on for you this year? And they were saying, you know, everybody's working from home. We're trying to get some things done, and everyone's working from home. Great. So how many of those work from home tax forms did you fill out last year? Oh, about 1,000. Great. How many do you think you're going to fill out this year? About 50,000. Are you ready for that? No. Great. And so we heard this from several different organizations. And so we said, okay, well, guys, why don't we get together and we'll build this once? Because if we were a large systems integrator, we would say, hey, why don't we sell the $1 million project to you and you and you and you and you? And we really didn't want to do that. So we said, guys, let's get together. We'll build one. And so what's in the lab right now with a few of our customers is saying, okay, here's the questions we need to ask. Here's how you get that over to the manager for approval. Here's how you get that back to HR to approval. And here's how you generate the form, and do that in a way that you don't need stamps, you don't need paper, you're not shuffling things around and losing them. But just make it simple, make it fast, make it easy. So that idea of taking something that has to be done consistently across quite a few different organizations, taking the complexity of this giant tax form and distilling it down into some basic questions, little bit of, you know, getting it to the right person, approve, reject, you know, send back comments. And we've done the same thing for budgeting, actually, for the federal government. So excited to do that too, but it's taking things that are complex and making them easy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And Sean, I'm, you know, one thing maybe if I can share that, you know, there's also a process behind how to do that, right? And it's part of our strategy because we feel it's so important. If you want to unlock the innovation, you know, it's not only technology, it's combining technology for a business need. And I just have the urge to show that real quick.
It's about putting people back at the middle. It's not just about getting the process and the technology and change managing that onto people, but making something that works for them in the first place.
This is the process by which we work, right? It's the design-led development, and there's phases you actually go through, and where we give guidance on how to do that. From an exploration where you identify the use case in general, what is the business problem you're trying to solve, where you get all the right people in. You have business there, you have the end users there, you have the people who have to operate it there. So you really get this 360-degree view on the needs of the different people interacting with this process. And then you go along these phases of discovery, talking to end users, talking to IT, how are you provisioning, what are your tickets, you know, really getting through all the details before you then design and iterate on the design before spending a single line of coding investment. Business tells you, I want it, the users say, I'd love to have that, when can I have it? And IT is ready to execute in the delivery. And then at the end, you really have that result people were looking for, and you create that innovation. And if along this process, you discover, we want to use conversational AI, or we want to use machine learning, then that's great. It's going to amplify the whole process even more. But what I have seen, and I'm sure you too, Sean, is even just by taking the technology people are familiar with and really living this, you create innovation. Everybody would say that was really innovation that came out of the process. And maybe one extra thing here at SAP, in the very end, we also want to learn from the adoption. So people use the application, we want to learn from it. And that's now, if you've heard that slogan in the past from it, so with Qualtrics product experience, we then connect the product to the end users, get feedback, and then potentially we repeat the cycle. And Sean, you being the first partner app house in the US, right? This is, I mean, this is the base of, I think, getting everything started.
Yeah, 100%. Getting, starting with exploring and really discovering what people actually need. It sounds old-fashioned, but the number of times I think we've all seen it, of somebody in IT or somebody in business had an idea of this is what they really need, and then they document the requirements and they go build that, and then people look at it and go, this doesn't help me. You know, the idea of really talking to somebody that's actually going to use it. It's a little bit like the old idea of taking the old paper form and then making a digital form that does the same thing, and just trying to imagine that taking away somebody's pencil is going to make that work. It almost never does, because if you still have to fill in all the same fields that you used to fill in, it's not actually really any smarter, and it's not saving somebody time. It means they have to use a keyboard instead of a pen and pencil that maybe they can do super quickly. So that idea that you can then understand what somebody really needs, what's really going to help them, and then prototype it. I mean, it's the number of times people skip straight to coding before they've actually prototyped something and then tested and validated the prototype. It's actually scary, because that's the stage where you can make changes very, very inexpensively. And that I think is one of the things that can really separate an investment in innovation and an investment in code that hopefully maybe helps somebody. But hope isn't a strategy. So go prototype it, test it, and validate it. And then you know that you're really onto something, instead of crossing your fingers and hoping that UAT goes well.
Yeah.
And maybe if I could, sorry.
Just one final remark,
Yeah.
Sean, that's something we also talked about, SAPPHIRE. That's how you create the trust among all the parties, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody knows what's coming. They're all looking forward to it. They're all signed up, and they're really motivated to use it and build that trustful relationship in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. It creates clarity, right? It creates common understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Janice, you wanted to add something as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to underline what Sean was saying. And, and one thing that I've always found is that when you work in this iterative process with the people who will be using the application, they often provide a lot of innovation into the solution. And this is amazing, because what I think, even with my research and working with various, kind of individuals, what I think would be a good solution maybe doesn't cover everything, because the people you're working with, they really know their business, they really know their jobs. And it's really great when they bring that innovation back. And you can only do that, as Sean says, if you're working in this iterative process, because if you've coded it and you've shipped it, that's a great idea, but we can't get it into the next cycle. So, this is one of the things that I find the most exciting about working with this methodology, is that you actually innovate as you go. Yeah? And that's just absolutely great. And it builds the trust, as Jan mentioned, because if they see that their ideas, their innovation is actually coming to life in the solution, they're going to be your biggest fans at the end, and then they're going to help you actually get this adopted, throughout your either throughout your industry or your business or your company.
Absolutely.
Janice?
They become your biggest cheerleader. Yeah, they become your, they because then it's theirs, right? They see that little bit of them in the idea, in the solution.
Yeah.
I actually think in the business space, there's not even an option, because we're not our own end users. It's different from the consumer space, where you maybe, I don't know, if you're designing Google Maps, you're also using Google Maps. For example, I used to design software for transportation management, and it's not, I'm not a transportation manager. I'm not a truck driver. I'm nothing of that. So I need to ask the people that have to use it. I can't do it on my own. And I think a lot of times in business software, that's what it is. We're not designing for ourselves.
So that's actually an interesting segue here to a question that was in the audience, right? When we talk about not designing for ourselves, we're designing for everybody. James asked the question actually related to accessibility, right? I mean, that is the larger inclusive design concepts that we're pushing for, right? So where does Fiori stand regarding accessibility, such as Section 508 compliance here in the US? Do we still need third-party software such as JAWS to be compliant? Do you want to take that?
I can take it to a limited extent. So I'll have to give a complex answer a little bit, because accessibility is finally delivered through the technology within a product, right? And early on, we talked about the design system as one design system for all enabling technologies. And these enabling technologies, just to name a few examples, maybe with Angular frameworks, maybe with SAP UI5, they implement the accessibility standard and the requirements that we design. So the design system defines it, the enabling technology implements it, and then the products consume the technology to build all their different applications, right? So in S/4HANA, we have we're in the 4 digits with applications. To understand the accessibility readiness, we have to look at the product. What technology are they using? SAP UI5. Okay, this is how SAP UI5 is accessibility compliant, and then we get there, right? But I want this because I know this is a hot topic in the market. Accessibility can be a deal breaker or a deal maker. And I just want to make sure we are specific. We have to look at the product and the capabilities that are there, depending on the frameworks they use. So.
I can add a little bit, at least in terms of the Canadian standards for accessibility. I don't know the Section 508 very well, but I know for Canada, even 3 years ago, we'd done some testing to make sure that some of the standard applications that are delivered by SAP and some others were able to handle some of the accessibility requirements. So they did need a JAWS reader. Some of the things that you need to watch, because I know there's quite a few developers on the call, there are some things that you need to take care of, things like the tab order as you're switching from control to control, and how things are labeled and how the labels are attached to controls. There's some things that sometimes if you're slapping an app together really quickly, you can very easily miss adding the tags and keeping some of the technical alignment that's needed for those screen readers to be able to help somebody with a visual impairment, for instance. High contrast was one of the other things that was added, because not necessarily everybody needs the full screen reader. So there's several different layers. It's a super complex answer. So I think the conclusion that we had come to was that it generally does support this. There's always exceptions. There's always things that somebody will run into. But I think that the conclusion that was reached after studying about 25 of the common applications that were going to be used by a group of people that needed that visual impaired based accessibility was that they performed pretty well. And so at least that's something that I can share from the Canadian perspective for federal public sector.
Right. So as we're trying to be better and more inclusive here, do we actually test with people who can, who personally maybe visually impaired, for example? Do we have a way to get that kind of feedback from customers as we're building the design system?
I mean, we have a dedicated accessibility team, part of our SAP UX organization. So we have experts in this area. I mean, SAP takes this really, really seriously. And in terms of the Fiori design language, I mean, we have currently with Fiori 3, we have our quartz light and dark themes. So, you can have the light or the dark, what you prefer. But also the theming concept allows us to deliver high contrast themes, high contrast black, high contrast white, and all, as a design team, we are very mindful that when we're designing, that we're taking into consideration the needs of people who don't see, you know, as well as we do, who can't manipulate a mouse, you know, as well as we do. And I mean, some of the things that we're working on currently, like in terms of the conversational UI, for example, voice recognition, even some of the kind of trendy stuff, you know, like the gaze interaction. What's very interesting here is that we can see that these are ways of interacting, you know, with software, with digital equipment, that could be extremely valuable for people who are, you know, less differently abled than we are. So we're very, very mindful of that. And I think Dina alluded to it earlier with some of our standard frameworks, the accessibility is built in. So into the controls, you know, again, we're very mindful of that. So if you take care, you know, of this, you shouldn't have to kind of do it all yourself. So yeah, we're very, very mindful in terms of design. And the thing is, for design, the more inclusive your design, and I think it was really interesting what Sean was talking about the taxes, because of course everybody has to do a tax return. Yeah, you can't choose not to do. Well, you can, I guess, but then the government would be on your case. So, and it's the same, you know, kind of with any kind of public, you know, service and software or website. It has to be usable by everybody in the population, regardless of age, regardless of language skills, regardless of their ability to interact, you know, with various pieces of digital equipment. So we're very mindful of that. And, you know, if your design is working, you know, for people who are not, you know, who have different abilities, then you're actually probably doing a good design for everybody, because you're probably taking away the extraneous and coming back to the simple design that Sean was talking about earlier. So actually inclusive, accessible design is good for everybody. Right. In the end.
So there was a specific follow-up question from Sumant, who said, any considerations and efforts toward WCAG 2.0? I'm not quite sure what that acronym is. Maybe you can help explain it. With more granular specifications across different systems, especially high-end and public sector needs this in order to comply, you know, with US guidelines. Anyone want to tackle that?
Well, unless you want to take it, Jan, I would say that this is really a question for our specialists in our Accessibility Competence Center. Unless you want to take it, or Dina wants to take it.
Well, does anyone know what WCAG is actually for a neophytes here?
It's a usability standard. Accessibility standard, sorry.
Okay.
And the team you mentioned, Janice, I mean, they're full-time experts. You mentioned we are really, accessibility is really important to us. So this expert team is closely looking at, but also working to contribute to these standards. And I'm just not so much into the details that I can talk to the specific one. But if we had our colleagues here, she could tell you in depth what we are doing.
So what we can do is, like, we can take the question and just have offline follow-up with Sumant on the answer, no problem.
Yeah, happy to.
I think I can tie this back to the comment that I made earlier in terms of assessing several specific applications. Those WCAG or WCAG standards are getting to the accessibility standards, and they are part of how the readers are, those screen readers are designed to help, and they consider several different layers. But in short, the answer is, in terms of things that you have to specifically consider, yes, you have to specifically take care, as Janice was indicating, that you follow those best practices for how you code to make sure the screen tag and so on go together, but also making sure that you're considering even just in the layout of the application. So because of all the tools that are there, there's an element of it can be like a PowerPoint, and we've all seen really wonderful PowerPoint presentations and some really terrible ones. So there are absolutely things that you need to take care of. But I think in this call, I think generally, yes, you need to be careful when you're developing something. I know SAP has put a lot of time and effort into making sure that those standard applications do follow that, especially for the widely used ones. And I know we tested that just a few years ago and found that they were generally compliant.
So in terms of like customer success, we heard a lot about from our executive board that customer success is very important to them in terms of like the new strategy. Sean, like you've been a partner and an SAP customer at the same time. So from your point of view, is like the updated SAP UX strategy, how will that actually help driving customer success in the future?
I guess I can back it up to 2014. We wouldn't have bought SAP to run our business on if it wasn't for Fiori. So I think the question for me at the time in 2013 and 2014 was, does SAP really mean it? Because of course there's been many different flavors of UX improvements, and the more I looked into it, the more I'd identified that yes, they really do. They really mean it this time, and they're really investing a significant amount of money and a lot of effort, creating things like several years ago that the chief design officer was given a veto right, if you will, to stop shipment on products if they just didn't meet the design standards. And so these were all things that started to reinforce that design and human-centered innovation was really becoming part of what was driving the product development for SAP. And I think for our company, we don't want to spend a lot of time training somebody that's going to be posting journal entries and following up on receivables or doing billing or handling purchasing and things like this. Those things just need to be simple. The days of when it's acceptable for that to be a high cost, high touch thing are gone. It's not innovative, it's not lean, it's not effective, it's not efficient to go and waste a bunch of time chasing that stuff. Things just need to be integrated from a process, a people, and a technology basis. And so I think that's a big part of why. So as an example, we'd gone live with S4 in 2015, and that's been a tremendous enabler for us. And then earlier this year, we added SAP Analytics Cloud to help us create more effective dashboards and deeper reporting that's more interactive. And so seeing that Fiori design language across multiple different products means, again, that consistency comes back. And that I think is one of the things that's really important, is how do we think about moving our businesses forward, and how do we think about how, even when times are challenging and money is tight, how do we find things that we can do? And I think that's the wonderful challenge that Jan and I were talking about over our Sapphire session, is finding things that you can do, because there are things that you already own. So we'd done that webinar a few weeks ago with Navi Raju around frugal innovation. And the concept of frugal innovation is leveraging things that you've already got. And so if you've got SAP, then you've got Fiori, right? You're paying your maintenance, you have Fiori, go. So go make use of it, right? Because those are things that can help your business run faster. And if you're not using it, then it might be a good time to give your head a scratch, because having somebody hump through ME29N to go and approve a PO is, if you like people, why do you still make them do that? It's cruel and unusual, right? It's maybe the way that was designed by somebody who didn't really like people a long time ago. It checked the box from some requirements list somehow, but it was the kind of thing that if it's not simple and not easy, then it doesn't cut it anymore. So let's go find some of those things. Let's get some of those things done this year.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Sean?
For sure.
We also invested a lot in making Fiori more easily adoptable, right? So talking about the efficiency, we invested in something we call rapid activation. So these thousands of apps, you can get them quickly activated. Or we invested in Fiori Elements, where we now have customers who tell us, okay, I can build that application in half an hour and then set it productive a week or 2 weeks later. Can you share a little bit about that from a customer and partner perspective? I don't know.
Absolutely. So in 2013, if you were deploying a Fiori application, it was clumsy, right? It was challenging. It was complex. You didn't have a direct transport path. You had to go in from queue and reach down into dev and pull some service context up, and it was hard. So 2014, 2015, that started getting easier, and now you can really just go and activate 100 Fiori apps very quickly. Very, very quickly. So call it the span of an hour, and you can have several hundred applications ready to go and actually ready to test. So that wasn't even possible in 2013, 2014. If we think about some of the other innovations, we think about being able to use ABAP to go, for all of those ABAP developers, how do you use ABAP to go and more quickly generate an application and have the ABAP code annotate and derive the behavior of the front end? If we think about the input helps, like the little F4 help in GUI, you know, if we think about the yes, I want to see my list of cost centers, well, that even just sorting, filtering columns on a list, that smart list is significantly more effective in terms of the controls that are available for somebody to use. So now you have the little gearbox that you used to have to code separately, and you've got the sort box that you used to have to code separately, and the input help and the filters and the include and the exclude. These things are now just coming. Peter Spielvogel and I had done a video actually on Tech Ed last year to illustrate some of these things. But Fiori Elements has gone a really long way to go and help make, if you need to go make an app, let's say you need to go make an app to go and display something very quickly. That really is quite a bit faster than it used to be. And so going and just surfacing some information in a ALV to be able to go and look at some charts and look at the list and flip and flop back and forth, that sort of reporting view is so much easier than it ever used to be. And in some cases, you can now do those without actually coding, just with the embedded analytics. And so those are some things that have gotten so much easier. And for the idea of in 2014, 2015, there was the make a Fiori app in 15 minutes. Cool, but it was basically a list of purchase orders that I don't know who needs just a list of purchase orders. But now you can take, for instance, your purchasing documents and take a CDS and then go render that in a view that you can start to filter and see some charts up at the top, and you can layer on through the embedded analytics some more sophisticated views, and you can start to bring some things together. So you can now go and create a view from Fiori, and then you can create an app to display it or a KPI to display it right in Fiori. So you don't even necessarily need to code anymore if you're able to take advantage of some of the views and some of the KPIs and report views that are right there in your S4 system. And so I think when we think about how far that's come from 2013 till now, I mean, that's a tremendous difference, in not just from self-service, from the idea of approving a PO becoming easy, but self-service from the idea of going and taking some views, joining them, and then creating a report. That's becoming significantly easier, which is making things a lot more accessible, and it's making the skill sets that people have from the ABAP perspective a lot more versatile. And it's making the super user capability to go in and get information a lot easier. You can now go in through the reporting view, and you can get, for instance, that pivot table style view right there. So obviously I can get a little excited about it, but it's come so far.
So I really like to hear you can build applications without even coding. That seems like a really interesting future. Maybe final question to the round. In terms of what are you most excited about? What's coming in the future that you say this is really exciting you in terms of Fiori, the design system, the technology, the applications? Maybe each of you a short answer.
What's really exciting me, is thinking about all these wonderful applications that are going to be built, using Fiori based on our design system, simplified on both sides, both for the end user experience and for the developers. So that's what's really exciting me. I'm just really looking forward to seeing more and more Fiori.
Great. Dina?
For me, actually, well, I'm not an end user of Fiori, really. My family is, and I have two brothers-in-law that are both using, one's still using SAP GUI, the other one started using Fiori, so they started working with the Launchpad in their company. And I'm really looking forward to having conversations where they're happier with them, and also when you're in Germany and you're working at SAP, everyone's always telling you their story. You go to a party, everyone's telling you, oh no, I have this really terrible UI and that I have to use, and there's codes. And I'm really looking forward to parties where people will say, I'm an SAP user and I like using it.
Great. Sean?
I like that. And I like the tie-in from the what used to be to what is now and what is still to come. And that compare and contrast of 12 different reports and transactions to go and find problems in sales order fulfillment to one app that highlights them. That to me is the example of before and after that we want to look to as a standard, because the idea that we take an old transaction code and then we make a Fiori app that does what the old transaction code does is just making the old a prettier shade of blue. And if we think about VA01, the sales order app, how do we make that simple? And how do we make something like that that has tremendous complexity underneath it? How do we distill that and make that simpler, easier, and more engaging?
Thank you. And Jan?
I'm really excited in executing on the strategy together with our customers and our partners, Sean, to make it come to life. I think maybe just a few things we didn't necessarily talk about explicitly I'm also excited about is the concept of Fiori AI, where we have situations detected by the system, recommendations made by the system, and AI views that are explained to the user. So why does the system make me this recommendation? I think really great potential, and we have first scenarios where that's implemented, but that's really exciting stuff. And last but not least, seeing the UX consistency throughout our products and getting a lot of feedback from a lot of customers and end users to evolve that even further. So really exciting times ahead.
Great. And so first of all, we're closing the call now. First of all, a big thank you to the panelists, really great conversation today again. And I really look forward to having you again in one of the next Fiori-side chats. If you actually missed any of the Fiori-side chats in the past, you can actually go and find them on our tinyurl link, which is tinyurl.com/sap-fiori-side-chat. You will find the recordings there. You find the agenda actually for the next calls there, and then all the login requirements for the calls. And having said that, again, thank you very much to the panelists. It was amazing talk today. And I really look forward to having you back soon again.
Thank you,
Thank
Eugen.
you.
Thank you
That
for
was
having
fun.
me.